You know these three, don't you?
Yeah. Sora, Donald, and Goofy.
So, it's been a while since I reviewed an RPG, and even longer since I've talked about a Square-enix game. For those new and old to my reviews, back when I reviewed Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories in 2017, I said Final Fantasy X-2, to make a sequel out of the previous reviews of Final Fantasy X for 2014, would be the next thing on the docket from Square's content, and not this game. Sadly, due to a host of real-life events, that review never ended up being made. Full disclosure, I don't think I'm ever going to get to it now. What Square Enix has done the last 2 years, specifically Tetsuya Nomura's slandering of CyberConnect 2 when they walked off the Final Fantasy VII Remake project due to Square's own mismanagement, has made me disinterested in talking about or promoting any of their content again, especially since that resulted in targeted harassment and belittlement by Square fans and the gaming news media, which CC2 was undeserving of. It really was the last straw for me that burned any remaining goodwill I had towards them. Had this not come in as a Patreon request from Chandler Ritter, I wouldn't have ever ended up doing it. Though there is a wealth of other examples of why there's so little positivity for Square Enix's works anymore. They flat out admitted the reason Kingdom Hearts 3 was stuck in development hell for so long is because of Tetsuya Nomura's own vanity and ego mucking up almost every other project he had been shifted on and off of. So if CyberConnect left because they had enough of the guy, that would literally be no surprise. Even if it did make all the work they had done on 7 Remake, like the demo everyone liked, be unusable by Square now because of laws concerning accreditation. Hell, the YouTuber Super Eyepatch Wolf did a fantastic breakdown in his Final Fantasy XV is a mediocre disappointment video on how both Nomura and Square's notoriously horrible mismanagement of their staff ultimately screwed it over from what it was originally supposed to be, which I was unaware of the last time I made comment about that game. And that's not even taking into account stuff like the Secret of Mana remake or The Quiet Man that ended up consistently on the worst games of 2018. While some Square subsidies still make decent things like the Tomb Raider reboot games and Octopath Traveler, as word from the corporation's president have heavily highlighted in their word style of a press statement, they have more and more started to become the Japanese equivalent to Electronic Arts in the gaming industry, ruining long-desired releases with their bass-backward management and making promises never kept. And they're not kept because the wrong people make the decisions for the work. It's no longer about making something good that will sell, but banking on a brand no matter how bad the underlying product is. While other companies like Konami certainly could have that kind of blowback on them, as anyone who's watched my older stuff knows, I've had a bone to pick with Square's executives since the Final Fantasy XIII debacle. So learning how they treated my favorite game developer has pissed me off. Even if CyberConnect 2 leaving the collaboration did end up leading to the remaster of my favorite game of all time. And really, that fact is why I didn't just refuse the request to begin with. Chandler also gave me a few alternatives to doing this game in his initial request, as I should be disinclined to ever dignify Nomura's name on my show ever again. However, since at least this came as a result of it, well, it's not changing my mind of him being a smeghead or his ego wasting the potential of the projects he is on, but it gave me lenience enough to do this final game from them, at least for the foreseeable future. If someone requests me to do more Square games, I'll do them, but going forward, I'm not doing them of my own volition, as there's plenty of other stuff that I can instead of them. Hell, the same type of bullshit is why I stopped talking about Toei's content as well recently. Which brings us back to Kingdom Hearts, which this all ties into, as Kingdom Hearts is inevitably Tetsuya Nomura's baby. Kingdom Hearts 3 is releasing as I'm publishing these videos, and this entry in specific is the game everyone's been waiting on its numbered sequel to be made, so it can finally, well, conclude the story. As everyone I know who loves Kingdom Hearts says, this is the best one of them. At least those that don't say Birth by Sleep. And well, as a reminder, I don't understand the appeal of Kingdom Hearts. I really don't. I'm indifferent to it. My college roommates gushed about it and played it on my PS2. My current roommates adore the franchise.
You and stuff.
I mean, and also the fact that
like,
combining with the actual the guest
the
characters
and stuff, like it was so good. Like
and the guest characters actually do shit instead of just being bad guys that do nothing.
Oh man, like it's so good. The limit breaks are so cool.
And the expanded.
I love the synthesis shop actually
and
matters.
There's emotional stakes here for this.
Yeah, like there's like that final battle, like.
And there's like.
And as I'm sitting here talking about it, apparently others want my view as well, and well, as much as I have legitimate grievances against Nomura and the other Square executives, it's not them that makes Kingdom Hearts not really appeal to me. The only thing I've come back to again and again as the reason is I don't like a lot of the Disney properties they use as location fodder and cross-advertising, and the main story you would think would be what would carry me through ends up a flimsy excuse plot to get us to go to all of the locations, with more emphasis placed on the scenarios set up in each visible world that is in isolation to the main plot. I've said it before and I'll say it again, the head writer for the Kingdom Hearts franchise, Daisuke Watanabe, is far better as a scenario writer, and not one that does well with story arcs, and Kingdom Hearts 2 feels like more of the same by its end. I'm someone that prefers it when small stories build off of each other to compose a far larger, grander picture of the narrative itself, instead of a series of islands which only momentarily interconnect, which in this latter case makes the time spent on and developing the main story I should care about ultimately inconsequential. Again, it's the difference between Final Fantasy X, which was small stories told along the road of a far larger and important journey that allowed natural camaraderie and character development, and Final Fantasy XIII, which by the creator's own admissions was just throwing the cast into disparate maps that lacked relation to one another, and anything that happened occurred because the plot said so. Artificial contrivances doth not good storytelling nor characterization make. That said, well, at least the story to Kingdom Hearts 2 seems to be far better about telling you what the hell is going on this time in its setup for everything, until it doesn't. And I mean that. The opening sequence set to Utada Hikaru's My Sanctuary does a great job of visually recapping the events of the previous two storyline entries in the series. Sure, the song has nothing to do with the game or what's happening in any way, shape, or form, but it's easy to follow along with what happened due to the immensely strong narrative storytelling that doesn't require a single word to get the point across. At least until Sora falls over and then... Wait, who's this kid?
Another dream about him.
And this is exactly where they lost me. I should also note that I don't like My Sanctuary by Utada Hikaru. I wasn't exactly on board with Simple and Clean, and this is for the same reason. The song has nothing to do with the story, nor is well paced nor beated to what's being showcased. They're pretty freaking incoherent. But yeah, back to Roxas. Who is this kid and why are we here? Well, to make a long story short, Roxas is Sora's nobody, a manifestation of Sora's indomitable will into an entity separate from him, created when he briefly became a Heartless near the end of the first game, but bearing all of his memories and abilities, and previously taken in by Xemnas, the nobody of the franchise's big bad Xehanort, back when the franchise's big bad was calling himself Ansem. Retcon or inconsistent storytelling? Potentially both. You make the call! Xemnas screwed with his head, turning him into the 13th member of Organization 13, those individuals we met in Chain of Memories who were trying to turn Sora and Riku into their servants that also happens to all be nobodies as well. Turns out they got their way through the proxy of Roxas, as Roxas retained Sora's ability to use the Keyblade, which was used to slay Heartless for the nobody's own purposes, harvesting the hearts freed from the Heartless to try creating their own Kingdom Hearts. Eventually Roxas caught on, and despite coming to be close friends with Axel, again who we met in Chain of Memories, decided to leave, only to be attacked by Riku so he could be brought here, a virtual simulation of the world, Twilight Town, which Roxas frequented when not on Organization 13 missions in order to be used to revive Sora. Very little of this information is at any point given in this game at a point where it would have actually mattered, and for the most part ends up immaterial to this story. I really hate how Twilight Town was dealt with. Almost the entirety of the starter area at Twilight Town, between 3 and 5 hours of the game, ends up being completely worthless to the story as it does not develop or seed any of this. It's just meaningless screwing around without adding anything of meaning. The second Roxas rejoins with Sora to restore Sora's memories, he ceases to be a character without ever being an actual character in the first place. He plays little to no influence on Sora, with not even Roxas' memories coming to reside in his other half, He seems to gain no special skill or ability from this fusion consciously, and you can't count Sora's new dual-wielding Keyblade skills as he earns and trains those on his own. There's no inner crisis of fate that's truly shown, bar one fight near the end of the game, which is at no point ever given that context, as Sora just gets sucked into it out of nowhere. To be completely honest, I don't give a damn about Roxas. This game gives me no reason to give a damn about Roxas or what he does in this town. Moreover, the game itself admits to how pointless it is, as various people keep trying to drag him out of it and speed him along to rejoining with Sora, only for that to keep being delayed. Supposedly Roxas is stuck in this fake simulation of Twilight Town. Oh, yeah, this entire place is in a virtual setting, so the tutorial is even more artificial and pointless than normal with Square-enix. So Namine can use his copy of what were once Sora's memories so she can undo the damage that she ended up doing to Sora back in Gate of Memories. But shouldn't the same thing result if Roxas willingly refused with him? That's what Namine keeps wanting him to do anyways. According to 358 over 2 days, he didn't have any lasting connections to Organization 13 anymore by its end, so if he wanted to one-up Sora and be the true Sora, then becoming the true Sora by fusing with him while the real Sora is an empty shell is an obvious way out of that. And it's not like he should have the pride, ego, or emotional reservations against doing that, since that's the goal of a nobody anyways, in trying to find their heart and rejoin with it. Even though the game keeps saying that nobodies don't have actual feelings or egos to even make them resistant to that, only echoes of those possessed by their true selves. But if that's true, then the organization members had to have been really bad people for them to be ruled by such echoes to being this malicious instead of waging war on the Heartless themselves. Hell, the Nobodies and Heartless should be natural enemies, as while the Heartless would consume hearts and grow in number, then by proxy the number of Nobodies would grow and then serve as their natural predator in their cycle of metaphysical existence. Not be seen as an operation of non-existence, the game keeps insisting they are, because it's clear that they do exist, and their existence is caused by a Heartless stealing their heart while their body ends up metamorphosed into another instinct-driven Heartless, leaving their true minds or an echo of such adrift and seeking reunion. But the form they take afterwards being a fake facsimile echoing what was lost. You'll notice throughout the Kingdom Hearts videos I keep waffling on what it means to be a nobody, but really, that's the problem. They are very terrible at explaining what it actually means to be one. This newest interpretation, born out of actually playing Kingdom Hearts 2 and watching the 358 over 2 days cinema collection, I feel now would better explain what a nobody is, and is comparable to what I've discussed before with both Persona and .hack.gu. The heart is the light of one's soul, the Heartless are created by the darkness consuming the body and tearing away its light, and thus, through that proxy, a nobody would be a shadow, the true self cast out behind the darkness as the light of the soul is cast out of its home. Suppress the instinct of the Heartless and restore the heart, you may still have the person, but the existent copy created by the mind in this separation still remains, wishing for reunion. If this would read as all that, then Xemnas' actions would be garbling these echoes into twisted versions of themselves, which, actually, from what I've watched at 358 over 2 days from its cinema scenes and the persona of the other organization members would read mostly true. However, this is all speculation because, despite reading the info on the Kingdom Hearts wiki and the data logs in this game, very little of this is explained or explored in this game that is focused on Organization 13 and the Nobodies being the central antagonists of its events. All the true information about Roxas and these characters was found in supplementary material adding on to the story made after it. Kingdom Hearts 358 over 2 days, which finally explained all of this crap, explored Roxas as a character, his friendship with Axel, what Xemnas actually did with these people to put in context all of this stuff from Kingdom Hearts 2. It released in 2009, 4 years after Kingdom Hearts 2, and not immediately and readily available for people. And not originally as a mainline accessible title at that. Oh no, it was a Nintendo DS game that people didn't really play, as the combat was garbage. And the lore expansion came far too late. And even more frustrating, it wasn't intended to exist in the first place. They only thought to give it backstory because people pointed out how many holes and how much supplementary material would have been needed to even bring people on board this story with how they wrote it as opening. And if you need supplementary material to explain what is happening in one isolated story and entry in your franchise, then you have failed as a storyteller. How does this game end up on top 100 games of all time list with such a severe narrative failing? Worse, 358 over 2 days ended up creating a problematic retcon. Here, Ansem, Riku, and Namine needed Roxas to be able to recover Sora's memories, as nobody is supposed to bear a copy of them, ergo Namine and Axel's actions. And yet Roxas in 358 over 2 lacks his own, with part of that story being about how Roxas develops into his own unique person. Thus, the entire inclusion of him in the plot to restore Sora no longer makes sense because of that, as he lacked entirely what they needed in the first place, which resulted in this ultimate confrontation. Instead they created a new character named Zeon that in fact had Sora's memories, which was then created somehow as a failsafe to Roxas eventually going rogue. But when she died, Roxas regained the memory data he was missing even though he didn't remember it at all, or her. What? But with that context, 358 over 2 now changed the entire reason why they needed him, and are thus murdering a unique person. Someone who has developed differently than who he was, just to revive someone who, from all evidence thanks to this retcon, they could have done so without and just gotten Zeon. I have no idea what they were thinking with that, but to be honest, it's just consistent with the slipshod storytelling of Square-Enix's titles the last decade, for them to have done that, and retroactively made worse what is considered one of the worst parts of this game. There was no legitimate reason for them to have led him to his death, as they didn't need him. At least that's what I keep hearing from my friends that do like this franchise. Oh, so many comments and discussions I've had directed at me since I said I was doing Kingdom Hearts that I just kept in my head without context, and it feels dumb as a result. What if they'd made the important bits of 358 over 2 days the introduction to this story? Organization 13 finds Roxas, they train him, and that being our tutorial levels this time around, Roxas realizes they're evil, abandons them, and leaves, only to run into Riku and Ansem so they could take him to Sora so they could become one again and start the game's main story, or at least what passes for it with Roxas' memories then being used as a guide for Sora to stop them. They made an entire game to explain away the problems of the main story of what is repeatedly called their best game. Well, at least at the time, some people say Birth by Sleep now, but that is neither here nor there. And in doing so, made people realize that 358 over 2 days could have just taken up the 4 hours that Twilight Town takes up in this game, and been a proper prologue to it instead of it being just time-wasting nonsense. Hell, to make Roxas have something of an actual point, you could have then had Sora encounter memory echoes as he, Donald, and Goofy traveled to the game's worlds. Be it his nobody that set up, caused, or had a hand in disturbances tied into the main story of each world that Sora then had to make right, since the organization is already eventually revealed to be involved in most of the things that are going screwy already, and instill in Sora a weight of responsibility in him beyond just searching for his friends that would actually continue Sora's character arc onwards from the last 2 games. One of my problems with this game is Sora's character arc? It basically dead-ended, with no further advancement. Hell, I know he's spent a few years sleeping in a pod where his body ages so he's going to act young and immature for his chronological age, but it feels a lot like he's had a complete character reset so the developments he went through in the first game have been wiped away to make him more nonchalant and almost Riku-like in his single-minded obsession to find his missing friend, when in the first game he realized that there were bigger things going on than just his own desires. He still puts what he wants to the side here when the prompting arises, but I keep getting the feeling as Sora traveled that his main motivator was just to find Riku and was using those he encountered to further that search as he in turn helped them as a mutual agreement, instead of the selflessness we saw of Sora in the original game's quest. I'm not saying Sora's a terrible character now, but I feel the Roxas angle of him coming to terms with what his other self did would have allowed the narrative to further a natural development into an emotionally balanced and mature adult as teenagers must inevitably grow into, not throwing childish things away to become out the edge in the face of adversity as Riku has tried and failed to do, but look upon them with a different eye and awareness of a bigger picture as he otherwise did in Kingdom Hearts 1. And why did we spend so long in Twilight Town then? Well, it's likely a precursor to the problems of Square-enix games after this. With modern Square, and at times also as well Retro Square, they don't have a story written for their games until long after the development team have made the assets for it, so must accommodate those disparate assets instead of the story directing what's needed to be made in the first place. It explains so much about Final Fantasy XIII onwards in retrospect, and Square straight up admitted that was what happened with not just the 13s, but 15 as well, and a few of their other worse-liked games. As a result of this, and other reasons as well, I have decided to not intentionally include information and content from the Kingdom Hearts sequels in this review of just Kingdom Hearts 2. While I will make some other references to later content to poke fun at the contradictions that result from later material trying to inject itself in retroactively, when judging the actual story that is showcased here, I am only going to be making use of things that happen here, and have happened in the prior Kingdom Hearts material made before this game, as the material that existed previous to this one should have been the only things to know in order to understand the deeper lore and nuances. This will not be, oh, this makes sense because of X event they wrote in years later down the line, showcase theater, as that is not how writing a story works or how criticism should be handled. You should not need an obscure factoid that was only introduced in a later data volume, or a promotional video, or a Twitter response from a staff member as an afterthought to make your story then make sense as it wasn't originally intended to be included. For if it was really that important to include, then it should have been included and made clear in the material they were presenting to begin with. If that information is in a side story released and occurring alongside the content, that's totally fine. A story tie-in in another media form? Okay, we understand cross-promotion. Patch DLC. Well, at least you're admitting to the mistake and later people won't notice as much later. In addition to a remaster of a storyline with entirely new content which adds a new epilogue and doesn't retcon anything before or after it, oh, we will certainly take that and then judge it as its own media, as that is not the problem I'm talking about. But needing to know entire other games or media entries worth of info just for this one main story to all fit together? No. Just no. That is far beyond reasonable. And why some might feel that may be required, beyond the obvious examples I've already talked about, is Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep, 358/2, Coded, Dream Drop Distance, Chai, and a fragmentary passage collectively and completely upend the lore presented in the first three games into a completely different beast than what is seen here. Though Birth by Sleep usually gets the highest number of defenses because it is an outright prequel that doesn't really negatively affect the first three games. But in doing so, all of this rewrites and recontextualizes the story as it had been presented up until the end of the second numbered game. It only solves some things that were stupid, only to raise far more questions later as a result.
You had your perfect little script, but you kind of forgot to write the sequel.
To try and untangle literally every single thing the 6 games after it changed in this one's story is a battle into and of itself, and frankly should not have been required in the first place. It is not my job to fill in their plot holes when trying to just talk about just this game, which only had context about it given to it upon its original release from the first game and Chain of Memories at the time. So if something does not make sense here in just Kingdom Hearts 2 and the prior content on its own, even if it got explained away later, then it's not my job to explain it for them. I did that with Final Fantasy XIII and its sequels already, and it gave me nothing but conniption fits, as all it ever did is make all of its story points worse, and showcase they couldn't keep their own story straight. Ditto anything at Toei presided over by Shinichiro Shirokura that I spent years bitching about. And like Kingdom Hearts, most media that tries to pull that crap gets savaged for trying it as just being plain awful. Kingdom Hearts tends to get away with it, however, as the ultimate direction of its story is really simple. The writers in Nomura just ridiculously overcomplicate it when it comes down to the details level. Ergo, their problem is with their storytelling for the main story points and not their fundamental concepts nor direction. I've not talked much about Twilight Town for basically all of these reasons. The region is entirely worthless. You spend hours doing pointless minigames which don't factor at any point into learning any gameplay mechanics, as you never do any of them again, and getting to know people that don't even exist. And I don't mean the, well yeah, they're fictional sense, I mean the entire, this is all a virtual simulation angle, thus these are fake people even within the story. Hell, you could have just had us do these minigames once in rapid succession and gotten on with it. And to be honest, I wouldn't even be so irritated at it if it were so long. From startup of Kingdom Hearts 1 on the Destiny Islands to Sora leaving Traverse Town with Donald and Goofy, that was an hour and 45 minutes of things actually happening. Yes, it only takes you 2 hours to get through Traverse Town the first time in the first game. In Kingdom Hearts 2, I spend 4 hours not doing anything of value before I get back to playing as Sora, and at most there being 10 minutes of plot and all of that it just feels like a waste. The only things here that matter are, 1, choosing your combat specialty, which just adds a single point to either strength, magic, or defense, which is still helpful. The order in which you learn useful skills, potentially a decent starting item if you kick the ass of Cypher from Final Fantasy VIII in a tournament that is known as The Struggle. Because the struggle is real. Meme jar. And finally, one of the side quests requires you to earn 1100 money, and if you do, then you get 2 extra AP points. AP, as with the first game, allows you to equip your skills, so getting these 2 spare here helps a lot. It makes it less essential to pick up every AP boost item or overlevel Sora just to equip everything you'd want or need. By the time I hit level 80, I had every ability I wanted to equip, equipped, as it does end up being a bit liberal about all of that.
Oh no! They're gone! Are gone!
All are gone? Huh?
You can't say... Why not?
The word. They stole it too.
Well, it is a Disney product. It's not like they're going to let you say, fuck. Amidst screwing around here, we get 2 important interludes. The first being to a teenage Kairi and her want to have her boys back as they've been gone years now, and our proper introduction to Ansem, going under the alias of Deez. And voiced by Christopher Lee! These games never do bad on voice actor recruitment. In his collaboration with Riku in getting Sora recovered. Yeah, we met Ansem in Chain of Memories, but back then he was nothing but a plot cipher. Here's where they actually tease the mysterious man's nature, as he collaborates with a man calling himself Ansem. Yeah, that's Riku in disguise. Dude overdosed in his own darkness, so is acting even more emo than normal. As you can probably tell from the first game and Chain of Memories videos, I really don't like Riku. I feel he's yet another character who betrays his friends for power and selfish motivations, isolates himself from them, and then they resultantly botch the redemption arc with them dismissing it as all is forgiven when they've not really addressed the problems between them. The game tries to tease this out as a big mystery about him, but to me, in knowing where they're going with it, it falls flat. There was nothing preventing them from telling Sora the second he woke up that it was him, that this was his penance and cost for his actions, and then asking Sora for help in dealing with the nobodies so they could finally go home. Why doesn't he? His own pride and false pathos. If you've watched my show for long enough, you know that I'm very consistent in the need for a character to own up to their screw-ups and failings in a reasonable time to the people they've wronged, and then actually make up for them, or change their ways. As when they don't, there is always left open that disparate gap that's never filled, but jumped over. Riku just going back to being a jerk about it all, but back to being friendly near the end where he does rejoin them, it doesn't work for me as a result, as he had the time to get over himself in the interim. Now yes, Riku does show he care in other ways. The reason Roxas is in the virtual recreation is Riku confronted him and using the powers of darkness defeated him, resulting in his Terra-North-shaped body. But all I was asking for was for him to have said with total sincerity to Sora, "I'm sorry," and for him to not pull this unnecessarily misleading bullcrap. As it's not like him keeping the secret or leading him by the nose was helping Sora in his developments as a Keyblade wielder. After he wakes up, Sora just ends up stumbling around blindly from place to place. Why not actually tip him off to this before splitting again, so the main character has an actual idea to what's going on? Due to what happened to Roxas, Roxas knows what's going on. We, the audience, has an idea of what's happening because of Axel and the nobodies infesting the simulation as they want Roxas back. But Sora, Donald, and Goofy... Oh right, that phrase is a mimetic counting gang with this game. Anyways, they are left in the complete dark through a fair chunk of the game, where there was no need for them to be, as they should have been caught up to speed so as to not be behind the audience so deeply. I have a lot of complaints about Twilight Town and how much story potential could have been had here. But again, it's a precursor to modern Square-enix where you see how they could have done so much more with what they had, and yet they didn't. Anyways, Roxas eventually figures out what's going on as a full-on nobody invasion happens in Twilight Town, leading to Roxas uncovering a mansion hidden behind a forest that in turn is hidden behind a crack in a wall, in which he finds Naminé that mostly explains what the hell is going on in them trying to revive Sora, and that Roxas will become a complete person lacking the emptiness nobodies feel by doing so. He won't die, just become part of something greater. And that same kind of rationale is also used for Gestalts like the Borg from Star Trek and any that tries to change people into copies of themselves. It is never not creepy or villainous sounding. Axel, because the two are friends, wants him to escape to freedom and sees pseudo-defecting from the organization because of that friendship having taken root in his heart. Even though this king keeps insisting nobodies don't have real emotions because they aren't real people, despite how we keep being presented evidence that that isn't so. To paraphrase Fate Stay Night, there is no rule that says an imitation cannot outdo the original.
You get on their bad side and they'll destroy you!
No one would miss me.
That's not true. I would. The Roxas that I know is long gone. Fine. I see how it is.
And thus Roxas reaches his former self and sacrifices himself to it. And I know this is supposed to be all sad and dramatic and heartbreaking, this character that we've come to know giving himself up to fate to bring Sora back, but the truth is I don't care, as nothing that happened in Twilight Town ever endeared me to him in the first place.
I hate you so much.
You should share some of that hatred with Sora. He's far too nice for his own good.
You know, he's not wrong on that. But yeah, sorry it took so long, but yay! Sora's back, and had something of a growth spurt. Happy this is a Disney game. Otherwise Sora's onesie would otherwise be having a few too many inconvenient tears considering how much someone can grow in the year he's been comatose. At least everything I have says it's only been a year. Dude shut up a full head in height in that time. Though it's not like I have a leg to stand on in that argument since I've been 6 feet tall since I was 13. Regardless, their memories are still a bit Swiss cheese due to the events of Castle Oblivion, stumbling out of the mansion into Roxas' friends who reveal... the king is in town? This sends them scurrying off to find Mickey, and falling into a swarm of nobodies. Fortunately, Mickey isn't an ambiguous goal this time, but actually does have a role in this plot, showing off his own status as a Keyblade master and rescuing them. He runs off before anyone can, again, try to get info to fill them in on what's going on, only for Sora to suddenly, out of character, have a one-track mind and only seem to give a damn about Riku when something bigger is going on. Again, I'm not saying they should have done all that I've suggested to fix the Twilight Town arc. I'm not a game developer, but directly addressing the Riku and Organization 13 situations up front would have dealt with a lot of the stupid of the early side of the game. For comparison's sake, the first game, there wasn't much of a resource to learn about what was going on. You were justifiably flying blind. Here, there are people who should be there to supply this information, and yet they leave without saying anything. We're basically pointless in the role of our own story. All he tells us to do is board the train to leave town, handing over a pack of money that Riku had stolen from Roxas in the virtual world before. That becomes a plot point later, as there's only supposed to be one that exists. The VR system that Ansem used, however, can both program in fake things and digitize and realize matter both in and out of the simulation via the same means of matter data conversion seen of Tron, Digimon, or Code Lyoko, or even some incarnations of Brainiac from the DC universe. I say this now as it's brought up again later, and since it's been explored in other media, I don't have much of a problem of it existing here without explanation, considering how it's mashed together with so many other disparate settings. And especially since this is a game that has Tron as the source for a region. And amidst that, Riku confronts Axel and by proxy Namine, who Axel helped out in getting her out of harm's way. Riku oddly leaves them as loose ends since they're not out to harm anybody, though considering killing them will restore/rejoin them with their true selves and it's seen as a mercy.
Castle Oblivion, you helped us.
Okay, fair enough. But anyways, yeah, the train. It's a magic one too, that sends us off to the floating island of Yen Sid. Also known as the sorcerer that was Mickey's master from the Fantasia short, The Sorcerer's Apprentice. Get it? It's Disney spelled backwards. But who should we find on Yen Sid's doorstep but Pete, the recurring foil of Mickey in Disney's comics and animated shorts. While Donald would eventually usurp him in the Disney cartoon trio as opposed to the usual relationship of dog, cat, and mouse, especially since Donald's expanded family has led to a wealth of memorable cartoons over the years with both incarnations of DuckTales and its spin-off. Speaking of, why has Darkwing Duck not been a Kingdom Hearts stage yet? Let's get dangerous up in here! Pete, however, well, he's surprisingly not had that much spotlight, despite being created before Mickey. Though the last time he did, I do actually remember a lot of it. And suffice it to say, it resulted in me having a rather odd disconnect to seeing him here as a villain.
It's time for that Mouse Empire to crumble and stuff.
Exactly.
That is the real reason. That is the legit reason. Pete is the real hero of the Disney universe.
I mean, all he wanted to do was just win a game. Yeah, I'm like, and the fact that he actually got a little pissy about not getting his prize, like, that's why you throw him in the realm of darkness. He is justified in taking
that is
back
why he is a villain.
the Mouse Empire
I agree.
from those bastards.
The Disney Empire will crumble.
Guys, you don't understand. They're the Goof Troop. They always stick together.
"13 years. It has been 13 years since I've learned of this plot point, and I've spent 13 years waiting for that joke to come up naturally in conversation. I win, we're done here. Pete, as it turns out, has been conscripted into Maleficent's service, the Dark Fae having rescued him from his exile Mickey imposed on him after he kept causing trouble.
You know him?
We sure do. Pete's been causing trouble for ages. His Majesty banished him to another dimension a long time ago.
You mess with a mouse and you get the horns! Uh-huh! And since Mal's out of the picture now, that made him the de facto leader of the Heartless faction.
You just wait. Nobody, and I do mean nobody, messes with the mighty Pete!
Except his wife, who half the time you think has a thing for Goofy. He sends Heartless after us, but even with years of downtime, it's like Sora never left, sending us up to Yen Sid, who doesn't even bother to tell us anything of value here either.
I was looking forward to finding my friend Riku, so we could go back to the islands.
Ignoring completely how Pete's making trouble with Heartless and trying to bring back Mal, people making trouble with Heartless is how the Destiny Isles were destroyed in the first place and you separated from your friends, plus those new monsters Mickey was fighting and that organization that had hope for you before, right? Where is your character development from the first game again, where you realize things like that are bigger than your personal desires? Yeah, Jensen just says there's a journey where all of that ends up happening, which, again, could have been dealt with had any of the involved decided to dial the 411 to tell us what's the dealie, yo. Yeah, never saying that again. And the big book of plot he has us read is likewise worthless. Though at least someone does explain the nobodies in Organization 13, but in really simplistic terms.
Nobodies do not truly exist at all. Nobodies may seem to have feelings, but this is a ruse. They only pretend to have hearts.
This is contradicted all up and down these games. And since Mickey knows what's going on, guess what? Repeat of the storyline of the original game and wandering aimlessly to find Mickey instead of then trying to track down leads on Organization 13. Yay. Man, they really could not figure out a good way to just supply us with a meaningful exposition on all of this.
Oh, sorry. Where's Sora, Donald, and Goofy?
Hey there.
Sora, Donald, Goofy,